everyone in my FinTech network. The minute one of those comes up on LinkedIn with a post, every single founder is like.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of our Think Like a Brand midweek mini-series, the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, where we discuss thinking like a brand, specifically in industries that often don't. Who are we? Well, in a moment you'll hear from my chum Liz High, an insight ninja, marketing strategist, speaker and author who's worked with some amazing brands and more recently has focused on supporting fintechs, banks and credit unions to embrace brand thinking. And I'm your host, Ian Truscott, sharing the marketing street knowledge that I've picked up in my 20-year career from techie to CMO. You can find us on LinkedIn, just search for Rockstar CMO or click on the links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com. This week, we'll round off our discussion about Liz's book, Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank, and I asked Liz about some recent news and commentary on Goldman Sachs' foray into the retail banking market. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Welcome back, Liz, to Rockstar CMO FM, Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank mini-series. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Jolly good. And it's we're recording this on Friday today, so it's not a Monday morning for you. It's a Friday morning, which is barely better, I think.
No, it's a lot better, but I'm slightly envious that you perfectly legitimately can have a glass of wine and I'm still having my third cup of coffee. But, you know, it's all right.
Well, I just think my weekend will finish before yours. Your last Sunday evening glass of wine will be my Monday morning. All right, so we've done the drinking. Sometimes we do the weather, sometimes we do the drinking. But last week we finished serializing your book, Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank. I'm doing quite well with getting the title right each time, so that's good. Yep. And we ran through all 5 principles over the last 5 episodes, if people want to catch up with that. So the first of those was sometimes do the counterintuitive thing. The second, embrace tension and create contradictions. The third, cue the remix. The fourth, remember product isn't what it used to be. And the fifth, coach and compose. And I thought I might take the opportunity just to finish off our serialization of your book to ask you, what's your favourite, Liz?
Yep. So I think, funny enough, when I kind of posted that we'd launched last week, and I opened my LinkedIn post by saying, I know you're not meant to have a favorite child or a favorite chapter, but the number 6 is it for me. So not show 6, principle 5.
yeah, we confused ourselves there.
Continue to mess that one up. So for me, the coach and the compose thing is really important because there's a million really great ideas out there in the world.
Yeah.
But if you don't take your team, your employees, your board, most importantly, your customers, those brilliant ideas won't live, breathe. Because the example that I use is, we weren't all born knowing how to bank digitally. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
So we had to be taught how to change our habits. We needed to learn new ways of doing things. And I think a lot of things that are revolutionary, things that are really innovative, people are not going to get them at first.
No.
You need to show people how and when to kind of use them properly.
I think that... Yeah, and I think that coach and compose. I mean, that's the reason why I'm here is to apply some of these lessons to other areas, particularly to my own. And I think that I mean, I worked at a vendor where we had a really exciting brand proposition that we put together, a new branding, and we were going to change the direction and go completely all out on this thing. And it wasn't the culture of the organization. You know, the other members of the board weren't feeling it. And you really, if you're doing something different, you really got to pull everybody along, haven't you? And you can't just go out on a limb and change the world in one go. Yeah. No, so Coach and Compose is your favorite. I love that. So, and we covered that, as you mentioned, in episode 6, which was the last episode, and covered the 5th of your principles. But on the topic of thinking like a brand, and why it's great that you've come back on. There's been some commentary on Goldman Sachs entering the retail banking market with their brand Marcus. I first heard about this from the Professor Galloway podcast, Prof G. And it was really interesting and that's what kind of inspired me to some of the conversations we've been having about the importance of brand, because there's this money dude, right? I don't know if, Professor Galloway is just, what he talks about is the markets. He talks about making money and all that stuff. And he's talking about brand and the value of brand in the context of this thing, which I thought was really interesting. And that he recognizes the value of the Goldman Sachs brand. It's a big preamble for me, Liz. Sorry about this. You will get a moment to speak in a second.
Oh, good.
But then you shared with me an article from the aptly named publication Financial Brand, written by Jim, is it Marous?
Maru.
Yeah, Maru, yeah, because I know you know. So in which, and he cites the challenges around that Goldman Sachs were having around the product, brand, and finances. And to quote the article, he says their decision to create the majority of new products in-house as opposed to leveraging outside providers that could create solutions more efficiently and at scale, and more relevantly to the show, which is why I feel this is a great share, is numerous rebranding efforts and created confusion in the marketplace. So, I mean, I'm guessing you've got a take on this, right, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I have. I think that, when from the living in fintech world, if you looked at, Marcus on paper, it would be purely, if it was a startup fintech, it would be lauded as the sparkliest unicorn ever.
Yeah.
110 billion in deposits, 19 billion in loans, 15 million customers.
Yeah.
But in the context of a bank culture, you can't make promises to deliver 4 billion in revenue and show up with 4 billion in cumulative losses. You can do that in fintech. That's like no problem, because that's what you're all about. But that isn't what a traditional bank stroke brand like Goldman, that's not their mindset.
Right.
It's not how they're looked at. It's not how the market sees them. And it's not how they see themselves either. So to me, it's inevitable.
Yeah. So they don't deliver on their brand promise. I mean, you're Goldman Sachs. You can't deliver 4 billion in cumulative losses. Whereas, as you say, somebody like Facebook or a fintech or does it, and it's just investment in the future, isn't it? It's just what we were. We will make some money at some point. Yeah,
and that's it's good. And I think one of the thoughts that I said my kind of favorite out of the book is the Coach and Compose principle. And I think there's a big part of that at play. So if you read all of the analysts' perspectives on why Goldman wasn't successful or as successful as they wanted to be with Marcus, I think a lot of it came down to a cultural mismatch between the team that were hired specifically as the experts in the consumer market to build, create, and acquire this, and the leadership of the bank.
Yeah.
Two diverse cultures.
Right.
And, a point of clashing. So, a big thing was, CEO wanted current accounts. The team that were running it were saying, we don't want to do that.
Right.
And there's just not that kind of understanding from the parent bank of the consumer marketplace. They just don't know it.
Right. So I mean, we talked about this I can't remember which one of the episodes, was that actually a good strategy, a good brand strategy is to form a sub-brand and then experiment with a new offering around a sub-brand. So, I mean, they've got an iconic brand, right? So was it that disconnect? Where did they go wrong?
So, in my view, it's not a disconnect. And one of the things that we sort of really stress in the book is that sometimes you just have to kind of try things. Okay.
Yeah.
But the really important thing is when you're going to try something, you need to protect it. Yeah. You need to accept that it's different. And one of my kind of a book that was recommended to me actually by a client is a book called Loonshots by Safi Bahcall.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting read because it's about, if you looked at all of the great ideas out there in the world, like going to the womb, going to the moon, like chemotherapy drugs, etc. The only reason these things happened is because there were a group of people that were given the time, the space, the tools, and the autonomy to do something that looked kind of crazy. And to me, that's a really nice analogy for what could have happened at Goldman.
Right.
If the team, of experts, if the experiment in Marcus was allowed to play out, then the outcome may have been very different.
Yeah, I mean, it means, and a lot of these new brands has been formed with far less investment, right? I mean, these guys have deep pockets, right? So how did they? Do you think they just didn't have the commitment that they realized they needed in order to make this happen? It's failed from a financial perspective rather than the idea, right?
Yeah, so it failed from a financial perspective, and I think a lot of it comes down to their understanding of the consumer marketplace.
Right.
So, for example, one of the kind of well-documented challenges that they had is that the people who took out the Goldman cards, in particular the Apple cards, had much lower balances than they estimated. Okay. They were expecting people to be, saving more in their savings product because their understanding of the consumer market was really kind of biased around more high net worth.
Right. The sort of people they're used to dealing with.
Exactly.
Right.
And, that's their strategy. And I think you kind of got to respect it. They've gone, we've done this. Sure, we've made some mistakes along the way. But you know what we're doing? Who we really understand is these high net worth individuals. Right. So we're taking all this equity that we've built in the platform, all this technology that we built in the platform, and we're going to apply it to the markets we understand. Right. People in the wealth management mindset, high net worth individuals, and really double down into what the Goldman brand stands for, which is that premier high net worth, not standard consumers.
Yeah. And that's what so you're saying that the Apple Card worked from that perspective because people that have Apple products and that are likely to take this out have some overlap with the Goldman Sachs brand in terms of the similar kind of aspirations. So those two brands work together is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. Right. I think that, I don't know if you have an Apple Card, but one of my friends, and just every time she pulls that card out, it's just useful. Yeah. And it personifies, the premierness, because it says Goldman Sachs. It doesn't say Marcus. It's Apple Card with Goldman Sachs. And the two brands are very simpatico from a visual perspective and from an equity and values perspective.
And I think so Goldman Sachs, they're clearly made a good decision with the Apple Card because they've got that brand resonance going. And I think you're raising a really good point about the fact that when you think about your brand is what does it mean for the person that is going to be using your product or service? What does using your product or service say about them? And I think, on the topic of credit cards, I've got a couple of American Express cards. One of them's the Platinum card and one of them's the Clear Blue card. And and I solely have them because of the the tactile nature of them and what they do and the reaction they get when I show them to people. It's very shallow.
Yeah, but I think there's a really, and I love what they're doing. A new card that's been launched in the US called the Founders Card.
Yes, I've seen a lot of ads for that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's like the product photography in their kind of ads is amazing. And, everyone in my FinTech network, the minute one of those comes up on LinkedIn with a post, every single founder is like.
Yeah.
Because they've really nailed that concept of belonging to a brand.
Absolutely,
and personifying your, I'm a founder,
Yeah. So why didn't they hit that with Marcus? And so you're saying that they went for a wrong demographic with that, and that so therefore the Goldman Sachs brand didn't resonate with that audience. So and so that wasn't that symbiotic relationship between brand and consumer, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And, I think the Marcus brand strategy was really, really solid. I mean, it's linked historically, it's named after one of the founders, it's a really good strategy.
Yeah.
But what happened, I believe, is they didn't have enough audience understanding and insight, and therefore the ability to pull the right data about their addressable market into their business plans.
Yeah.
So I love the Marcus brand, for the record.
Yeah. But do you think they should have built something then more for their existing demographic and try to widen their brand appeal to that same group rather than go after a whole new segment?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were business pressures for them to do it. They haven't diversified their product portfolio for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's not just big banks like Marcus that go through this. I work with community banks every day that are just under pressure to, build a new digital experience because they feel like they have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, over the last 6 shows, we've discussed a number of examples that you've come up with. So is there an example in your work where this has kind of gone better for somebody? I mean, this is a very large, very well publicized launch and stuff, but have people have other brands or banks got this right?
Yeah, so I think one that I would highlight is Bank MD, which is was specifically created, and coming back to the card thing, when you talk to customers of Bank MD, they really love the fact that their card says Bank MD. So instantly they go, "Oh, you're a doctor."
Right. Yeah.
So it's that whole thing without purveying status. It does it through the card. And they were really successful in identifying that. If you think about, certainly in America, doctors not terribly, but pretty terribly paid for the first 5 or 6 years of their career while they're training, huge student debt.
Yeah.
They're very unattractive from a credit perspective till they're like in their late 30s, maybe. Yeah. So what this bank did is that they recognized that actually they're a really great credit bet. Because unless they do something really wrong, they're on that very strong upward trajectory. Yeah. So let's take a risk on these kind of doctors, people that are just starting their residencies. Let's let's take a risk on them. Let's give them mortgages. Let's give them loans to set up their practices, and the dividends pay off.
Yeah, especially, it's one of those products, isn't it, that we don't tend to change very often. I'm probably with we're with the same bank that we were with when my wife and I got together and brought our finances together. God knows how many years ago that was, right? And it's not something you change on a whim, is it? Your bank. So getting in early is always a good challenge. Yeah. I also heard something the other day that the young people are the ones that are choosing their different brands that they're going to have, and then when people get into their sort of later years and their high spending years, they're going to be still loyal to those brands where those relationships were formed much earlier in life. So if Bank MD does a great job by you when you're in your 20s, you're still going to be with them when you're 50s. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about that, we talked a lot about this notion of tribalism. Actually, I read a really good report yesterday from Horizon Media over here, where they kind of looked at Gen Zs.
Yeah.
And what's really important to them, how they're making decisions and what they're influenced by.
Yeah.
And that really ties into the importance of tribalism. And the whole thing about the next generation of people that are coming through for every industry, not just for banking, are going to be making decisions earlier about what they like.
Yeah.
They're going to be making decisions to find companies that they feel like they're part of a tribe.
Yeah.
And the branding is going to be so much more critical. It's only getting more critical as that generation pushes through. So it's a really good read, actually. Let me just remind myself. It's called the Gen Z Field Guide.
Right.
And it's published by Horizon Media. It's really super interesting. I can give you the link to it. It's definitely worth the read.
Splendid. Well, I'll add that to the show notes, along with the article we were referring to earlier about Goldman Sachs and Marcus. And that's splendid. And we've come up to time. And Liz, another great conversation. I'm glad we closed out your book, and really pertinent conversation about Marcus. And will you return next week? We'll talk more about brands and banks.
Yeah, love to.
All right, good show. I'll see you then.
Speak to you later.
So that's a wrap on this episode of Think Like a Brand midweek mini-series for the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks to Liz for her insight, and for you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. You can find all our contact details in the show notes, plus a link to Liz's book. And we are Rockstar CMO on all the socials. And if you like this, please help share the good news with a rating or review in your favourite podcast app. I'll be back as usual on our show on Saturday. I hope you join us for that. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week. And thanks again for listening to Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.